alcohol ingestion causes decreases in testosterone. Aldehyde is poison. It will kill cells. It damages and kills cells. 4 to 13% increase in risk of breast cancer for every 10 grams of alcohol consumed. Let's address what alcohol is and how it affects the cells and tissues and organs of your body. Okay, so some basic chemistry and biology of alcohol. Because of the structure of alcohol, it is what's called both water soluble and fat soluble. What that means is when you drink alcohol, it can pass into all the cells and tissues of your body. It has no trouble just passing right into those cells. The fact that it can pass into so many organs and cells so easily is really what explains its damaging effects. I should mention that there are 3 main types of alcohol. There's isopropyl, methyl, and ethyl alcohol, and only the last one, ethyl alcohol or ethanol, is fit for human consumption. However, it is still toxic, okay? It produces substantial stress and damage to cells. And it does that because when you ingest ethanol, it has to be converted into something else because it is toxic to the body. And there's a molecule inside of all of us called NAD, and you may have heard of NAD because it's quite popular. There's a lot of discussion about NAD in the longevity literature right now. NAD is present in all our cells from birth until death. The levels of NAD tend to go down across the lifespan. There are ideas that increasing levels of NAD may extend lifespan. A lot of that is still controversial, or at least we should say is ongoing in terms of the research. But nonetheless, when you ingest ethanol, NAD and related biochemical pathways are involved in converting that ethanol into something called acetaldehyde. It's broken down into acetaldehyde. And if you thought ethanol was bad, acetaldehyde is particularly bad. Acetaldehyde is poison. It will kill cells. It damages and kills cells, and it is indiscriminate as to which cells it damages and kills. Now, that's a problem, obviously, and the body deals with that problem by using another component of the NAD biochemical pathway to convert acetaldehyde into something called acetate. Acetate is actually something that your body can use as fuel. And that process of going from ethanol to acetaldehyde to acetate does involve the production of a toxic molecule. What that means is that if your body can't do this conversion of ethanol to acetaldehyde to acetate fast enough, well, acetaldehyde will build up in your body and cause more damage. So it's important that your body be able to do this conversion very quickly. And the place where it does that is within the liver. And cells within the liver are very good at this conversion process. But they are cells and they are exposed to the acetaldehyde in the conversion process. And so cells within the liver really take a beating in the alcohol metabolism events. So the key thing to understand here is that when you ingest alcohol, you are, yes, ingesting a poison, and that poison is converted into an even worse poison in your body, and some percentage of that worse poison is converted into a form of calories that you can use to generate energy, generate ATP. And the reason why alcohol is considered empty calories is because that entire process is very metabolically costly, but there's no real nutritive value of the calories that it creates. You can use it for immediate energy, but it can't be stored in any kind of meaningful or beneficial way. It doesn't provide any vitamins. It doesn't provide any amino acids. It doesn't provide any fatty acids. It's truly empty calories. I know some people talk about sugar as empty calories, but sugar actually is a far better fuel source than alcohol or acetate. When you ingest alcohol, some percentage is being shuttled into a worse poison and some is being shuttled into a fuel source. Now, the important thing to understand is that it is the poison, the acetaldehyde itself, that leads to the effect of being inebriated or drunk. Many of the circuits in the brain that are involved in mood and feelings of well-being and also sort of self-image and how we see ourselves employ the neuromodulator serotonin, and alcohol, when we ingest it and it's converted into acetaldehyde, it goes and that acetaldehyde acts as a toxin at the very synapses, the connections between the serotonergic neurons and lots of other neurons. In other words, when we ingest alcohol, the toxic effects of alcohol disrupt those mood circuitries, at first making them hyperactive. That's right, making them hyperactive. This is why people become really talkative. People start to feel really good after a few sips of alcohol, at least most people do. And Then as they ingest more alcohol, or as that alcohol wears off, serotonin levels and the activity of those circuits really starts to drop. And that's why people feel less good. And typically what they do, they go and get another drink and they attempt to kind of restore that feeling of well-being and mood. Now, typically what happens is that as people ingest the third and fourth, maybe even the fifth drink, there's an absolute zero chance of them recovering that energized mood, right? Most people, as they drink more and more, will now start to feel more and more suppressed. The forebrain is now shutting down quite a lot. A lot of the motor cortical areas that control coordinated movement and deliberate movement start to shut down. So people start to slur their speech. People start to shuffle their feet. People forget their posture. People start to lean on things. People start passing out on couches. There's a great depression, not depression of the psychiatric depression sort, but a depression of alertness and arousal, and eventually people will pass out. Now, I said most people because there's a subset of people that have gene variants or who are chronic drinkers or who are chronic drinkers and have gene variants that as they ingest the third and fourth and fifth drink, what happens? They become more alert. They start talking more. They feel great. They have all sorts of ideas about the fun they could have that night. And they're the ones that if you've ever fallen asleep at a party for whatever reason, or you're getting tired and you're yawning, you're looking around the room and like these people are still drinking and partying and they're having what seems to be this amazing time. Often, not always, those are the future alcoholics in the room, or those are the people that have a genetic predisposition for alcoholism. Now, this is important to understand, and it's important to understand because I think everyone should know and recognize their own predisposition and kind of risk in terms of developing alcoholism. It's also important to understand because it relates to the phenomenon of blackout. Many people think that blacking out is passing out, but blackout drunk is when people drink and they're talking and doing things. Sometimes sadly, or tragically, they'll often drive home or walk home, or they'll hop on a bicycle and ride home, or they'll go swimming in the ocean. All, of course, very dangerous activities to do when people are really drunk, or even a little bit drunk in some cases. So these people will do these sorts of things, and they do them because they have the energy to do them, and they feel good while doing them, but they are doing them while the activity of neurons in the hippocampus, which is involved in memory formation, are completely shut off. And this is why the next day you tell them, hey, maybe we should talk about what happened last night. Like, well, what happened last night? He said, well, do you remember going to the party? Yeah, no, it was great. We did this, and then what? And it's very clear all of a sudden that they have no recollection of all the things they were doing despite being awake. One of the really bad effects of alcohol, but that's extremely well documented, is the fact that alcohol, because of this toxicity of acetaldehyde and related pathways, can alter DNA methylation. It can alter gene expression. That can mean many things in different tissues, but it is associated with a significant increase in cancer risk, in particular breast cancer, and in particular because breast tissue is present in both males and females, but in women, it's especially vulnerable to some of the DNA methylation changes. Well, breast cancer in women has a relationship to alcohol intake, and alcohol intake has a relationship to breast cancer in women. In fact, there has been proposed to be anywhere from 4 to 13% increase in risk of breast cancer for every 10 grams of alcohol consumed. How much is 10 grams? Well, there we need to think a little bit about the variation in the amount of alcohol in different drinks across the world, and just giving you some good rules of thumb to work with. There have been studies of the percentage of alcohol included in different drinks and the sizes of different drinks that are served in different countries. And here's a kind of a patchwork of those findings. In Japan, 1 beer, 1 glass of wine, or 1 shot of liquor as it's served there tends to include anywhere from 7 to 8 grams of alcohol. In the US, 1 beer, which generally is 12 ounces, if it's in a bottle, 1 glass of wine or a shot of liquor tends to include about 10 to 12 grams of alcohol. Lastly, I want to talk about the effects of alcohol on hormones. The hormones that most often get mentioned and talked about on this podcast are the hormones testosterone and estrogen, which are present in both men and women, and that in both men and women are important for things like libido. They're also responsible for sexual development, actual development of the genitalia, before birth and after birth. They're responsible, for instance, estrogen is important for memory and cognition. You never want to drop estrogen too low in men or women because it can disrupt cognition and joint health, etc. It's fair to say that alcohol, and in particular, the toxic metabolites of alcohol, increase the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. Now, in females, this may be part of the reason why there's an increase in estrogen-related cancers. Breast cancer can be either estrogen-related or non-estrogen-related. There are other types of estrogen-related cancers outside of breast cancer, but it appears that one reason why alcohol increases the risk of breast cancer is because of this aromatization of testosterone, to estrogen. In males, accelerated or abnormal conversion of testosterone to estrogen can actually lead to growth of the breast tissue in males, so-called gynecomastia, or other effects of high estrogen, or I should say of altered testosterone-estrogen ratios, because that's really what's important. And these can include things like diminished sex drive, increased fat storage, and a number of other things that I think most people would find to be negative effects. My read of the literature, or I should say, my understanding of what I would call the center of mass of the literature on alcohol is that no consumption, zero consumption of 0 ounces of alcohol is going to be better for your health than low to moderate consumption of alcohol.